Hi everyone! I'm Gabriela, a freshman at the University of Pennsylvania studying business and international studies in the Huntsman program. I'm from Cali, Colombia, and I'm beyond excited to be here with you all and moderate this panel about something I find extremely interesting and frankly an incredible industry, private equity. It was with great admiration and enthusiasm that I present to you our truly incredible panelists, Jacob Bloch and Rick Shrotri. Jacob will join us shortly, but for now, we will do a quick round of introductions. So, Rick is the founding and managing partner of Digital Alpha. He does next generation internet focusing on digital infrastructure. Rick Shrotri has been a technology and telecommunications investor for more than 2 decades. Prior to founding Digital Alpha, he was managing director of Cisco's business acceleration team, where he focused on identifying and developing opportunities that required equity financing. In addition to that, Rick previously worked on Samsung's external innovation strategy, including mergers and acquisitions and joint venture structures for the semiconductor and mobility divisions. I don't know, Rick, did I miss anything? Is there anything else you would like to share about yourself before we
No,
begin the panel?
sure. That's a great background, Gabriela. Very happy to be here and to give some perspective also, to your audience. I think the private equity industry is one of the most dynamic and exciting places you can be in terms of being able to find companies and opportunities for growth. In terms of helping companies scale and build value. So I think, what I've been doing right now in founding and leading a global private equity firm is an outcrop of a career where I learned the foundational skills of how to think analytically about how to think about businesses, how to think about numbers and companies at the Wharton School. Also, like you, I did a program in international relations with the College of Arts and Sciences at Penn. And I had some diversity of education that taught me about how to do business globally, which was very helpful in my career, as you pointed out. So I think just, again, as a foundational step for everyone's visibility, private equity is a very distinct industry. It's one where you can be very hands-on and you can really help companies grow. You can identify future trends and you can really help shape the future destiny of companies rather than looking, at desk work, sitting back at your computer. If your personality is such that you want to be out in front of people and you want to be helping make an impact in businesses, find areas for growth, then private equity is a fantastic career to pursue.
Thank you so much for that. I think Jacob just joined us, so I'm just going to do a quick introduction about him. So, Jacob also graduated from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and is the founder and CEO of Passport Springs, the largest hot springs and spa venue in North America. Jacob has extensive experience working with hot springs, recreational real estate ventures, and private equity transactions. On top of founding and being the CEO of Passport Springs, Jacob is also the managing partner at JBBH Holdings, a private investment firm in New York. Jacob has quite an outstanding record even during his varsity years. He graduated 1 year earlier in the Bachelor of Science from the Wharton School. And I don't know, Jacob, tell us a little bit about yourself. Did I miss anything? Anything else that you would like to highlight, point out?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And you have to forgive me. I'm actually I'm doing 2 events at once right now. So yes, thank you for having me, and also Rick, thank you for joining me, and of course Harsha and the team for putting together this event. So as Gabriela mentioned, I'm the president of a private investment firm based in New York. I'm also the founder and CEO of Passport Experiences, which is developing experiential wellness spaces across the United States, starting with our first venue in Atlanta. Private equity is something that really excites me, and I know that it also excites some of the people that have joined. And there's a whole host of reasons that folks are, gravitate towards this space. And I think for students at Penn, it's wanting to be able to do something which they think their impact is amplified through investing in companies and investing in people. And that's something that that's something that piqued my own interest and has continued to propel me. And I'll pause right now to let the panel continue. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you both so much for joining us. Okay, so without any further ado, we're going to start with our questions. So first of all, could you give us a general overview of private equity and how does it work?
Yeah, happy to do that. So the private equity space is one where your fundamental role is to bring capital to companies to help them achieve an outcome, and that outcome could be growth. That outcome could be to restructure the business and find a way to pursue, the best new areas that are opportunities. Your objective in private equity is to support businesses fundamentally with the fuel they need to succeed, which is capital. And so we are stewards of capital. That's a serious responsibility. We manage funds on behalf of pensions, on behalf of governments around the world, on behalf of groups of individuals, where we have that obligation to make sure that that money is spent well and is spent wisely. And so in the private equity industry, your fundamental obligation is to be a steward of capital, to invest it behind great companies, great teams, great plans, but then also help monitor those investments over time. So once you make an investment, it's not the case that you put your pencil down and go on to the next thing. You're now committed as a part of a transaction on a multi-year journey to help a company grow, to help a company achieve an objective and an outcome. You help that company scale up, hopefully, and exit either by selling it into the public markets, into the private markets. You find a way to deliver value back to the investors that have entrusted us with capital. But at the same time, you try to do something good for the world, which is to build businesses that matter, build businesses that are sustainable, that are improving quality of life. In our space, we're looking at technology as a foundational shift in how we're consuming what we do every day when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to living, working, education. We know technology is a key linchpin of our society. So trying to find the right ways to invest in that ecosystem, trying to find the right ways to deliver value around that ecosystem is fundamental to being the role of a private equity investor. Again, for students, it's really important to internalize that continuum of what's required in this industry. It's analysis that helps you make investments. It's responsibility to track and stay on top of portfolio companies. And then it's relationships that will help you actually sell and exit an investment over time. And so that entire continuum is a part of what private equity is and why it's such an impactful industry for society.
Wow, thank you so much for that. It's really interesting, truly admirable work. Jacob, would you like to maybe talk a little bit about what's your overview of like private equity? Like, how does it work? Something that like you would want to mention about it.
Yeah, I would. And what's really good about doing this panel with Rick is that he gives such a thoughtful answer. And all I have to do is just add a little bit of extra color to it. So I'd say there's so much capital with within private equity right now that looks at deals. Um, there's just a lot of folks looking at companies or at a thesis, kind of like folks like Rick right now, and obviously you could see the amount of thought that folks are putting into it. And what what makes it what still makes it enjoyable, but and is that there are really so many different forces moving within these spaces and lots of smart people thinking about them. And our job is to say, there's all these different waves moving. Where do we really think the tide is going to go? And sometimes it's different than how other people think it, or sometimes maybe everyone agrees on where the tide is heading. It's just a question how big of a tide do we think it's going to be? And that's something that I'd say is something that I enjoy from private equity. Is thinking about taking a position and where I think that long-term tide is heading. Besides that, I'll turn it back over to you, Gabriela.
Yeah, thank you. Truly an incredible industry. And now that we all kind of know what it's about, we would like to know a bit more about how you found your career path. What steps did you take that led you to private equity? How did you find like your passion? What opportunities or what obstacles you encountered in the way? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Gabriela. So I'm happy to start, with my background. As I came out of the Wharton School and the joint degree program, I was fortunate to have a role at Goldman Sachs, where I learned a lot of the foundational principles of investments. And so I joined the merchant bank at Goldman Sachs, which was the unit that was responsible for making investments, principal investments. Prior to that, I'd done internships in investment banking and in finance, so I had some background and experience in looking at this space. But what I didn't know, sitting in your shoes, kind of where you are as a student today, is exactly how am I going to have an edge? Exactly how am I going to be successful? Exactly how am I going to stand out and really achieve something great in this industry? And that's okay. Most people don't have that visibility and that awareness from day one. But the way that I think you cultivate that is by learning, by having an open mind, by engagement, by traveling and seeing and meeting people that can inspire you, and then you'll find the right way to fit and to add value. So in my first job after I left school, I worked in the New York headquarters of a prominent investment firm. But then I had a chance to go out to Silicon Valley, where a lot of deal flow was taking place. And I built a different network out there in Silicon Valley, in Menlo Park. And that got me connected to new ideas that were coming up in Silicon Valley at that time as I started to learn this industry. And that network is one that I kept. And even as I went to graduate school, then I went to Harvard Business School after a couple of years in the workforce. I focused in my graduate studies on, how do I build a well-rounded skill set, not just learning how to do financial analysis, but learning how to be a manager, learning how to manage other people and bring on, diverse set of skills that are beyond what I had my own training in on that basis. So like everything else in life, experience really matters in terms of being able to deliver your own confidence in what you can do, and also your ability then to add value to companies, to platforms with more and more credibility. So there's no specific linear path. You go from A to B to C, but rather the first step as you start in that first path in A is to have an open mind, to be inspired by people around you, to learn, and eventually you will also be credible. Eventually you will have opportunities given to you to help advance a company, to help advance a business plan. It might be small at first, it might be just a part of one division, it might be analysis of one company, but ultimately you'll get entrusted with more and more responsibility. I think if you demonstrate conviction, if you demonstrate competence in getting the work done, and eventually you'll be entrusted with more and more responsibility. And that fundamentally is the nature of this industry, and why I think it's so attractive is that you have a lot of leverage. It's not just your own work effort. You have the continued effort of of teams that you can work with, the efforts of the companies that you can be involved with. The capital is an accelerant. It's a catalyst to help you do a lot more faster than any individual could on their own. And that's really the awareness that I had gradually in my career as I started from that skill set of basic financial kind of knowledge to industry knowledge, kind of domain expertise, and ultimately gaining credibility with an ecosystem of people around me that would say, yes, this makes sense. Yes, I will support you to move forward with the next set of ideas and plans from here. So I think having that passion, having a degree of openness and curiosity, and ultimately having conviction, is essential to be successful in this industry.
Wow, thank you for that advice. Truly an inspiring path and very admirable, impressive, and hopefully one day I'll grow up to be like you. But I don't know, Jacob, could you please try to expand on that same question about finding your career path, how you ended up in the industry, all of that?
Yeah, I will. So I'd say part of it is one has to be open-minded and just trust. Keep using my water example, where these waves take you. So when I was a freshman at Penn, I was a very eager freshman, and I wanted to be able to do something. I wanted to be able to work. So I sent out hundreds of cold emails, and I spoke with a number of alumni. And the reason why is because when I was sending out cold emails, I was targeting alumni who were partners of private equity funds, hedge funds, and thankfully, some of them responded to the overeager freshmen who contacted them, and that's how I began to learn about the industry. I felt at the time, if someone would hire me, it would clearly be the person who was the boss. So I just continued meeting with them, and eventually one of them was willing to take the position on me that I could join him over the summer. So that first summer, I worked at a private equity fund, and also I throughout that summer, I continued meeting with other alumni who were interested by my email. And I said I'd love to meet them and learn about what they do. So that's really how I got started. It was just because I was an overeager freshman. And then since then, I'd say it was just really being open-minded when I worked on deals. Eventually, when I worked at a private equity fund following my graduation, is asking questions on deals and being willing to learn about all different types of industries or structures. That was from speaking with different operators, but also speaking with the of course the partners at the time. And that's what got me started in private equity.
Yeah, thank you. As a freshman at Penn, I'll definitely take that advice and probably start reaching out, because the network and the alum are truly incredible, and you have to take advantage of that, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing that experience with us. And now that we know how you got there, we would like to move into, what has your experience have been like working in private equity?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Gabriela, just through also my career, right? So I started off obviously in a more junior role where my job was to focus on a company that had been identified, let's say, as a market leader in one of the spaces that it's in, and let me do some analysis and figure out, what are the strengths of the company, what are the weaknesses of the company, and you can do that kind of analysis work. The separate piece of it that I learned that I really enjoyed was trying to judge people. And that's something that's much harder to learn in school, right? Because you can learn about certain attributes, but ultimately, when you start to engage with different leaders, you start to see their style, start to build a chemistry with various teams, and you get a perspective of what's likely to work and not work. And I think that's also a really important intangible skill set that I started to cultivate over time, as a private equity investor. And that became also increasingly important, as I learned more about the industry. But fundamentally, we've been fortunate in that there's been a super cycle for private equity assets. Private equity, if you step back, is the single best performing asset class of all investments, right? So I'm talking about taking a risk adjusted view of stock market performance, of bonds, of all kinds of other instruments that are generally part of investable asset classes like real estate, other areas out there. Private equity has outperformed every other asset class over decades. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And the reason, again, I think is because of this ability to add value. You're not just riding kind of I think Jacob used a good analogy of a wave, and you can certainly get a view as to where that wave is going to break and what's coming next. And that's a really exciting part of this industry. But what you can also do, even while you're riding that wave, is you can actually pivot and start, helping companies make changes to their business fundamentally. You can help them acquire other assets. You can help them focus in new areas. You can help them build new products and new capabilities. That really is, I think, the secret of success in this industry. I learned how to do that over time, and I enjoyed that immensely. So what motivates me today as a private equity investor, it's working with the leadership teams of our companies to really have an impact on society. I know the investments that I make will make a difference when it comes to how we're going to consume and use the internet. I know it's going to make a difference in how we're going to impact major verticals like transportation, healthcare, energy. I know that the technology portfolio that I have has that kind of world-changing potential. And so I've got to assemble the right team, the right people, the right strategies to deliver against that continuum. And so again, from an experience perspective, for me, seeing how you can go from, the starting points of being a bit of an analyst, of learning how to, look at cases and plans and support that kind of work, to eventually engaging as a business partner with teams, and ultimately to be able to set direction to say, this is where we see the future and opportunity. Let's identify the right set of companies and teams that can help us get over there. I think it's a really interesting trajectory, and it's also reflective of where the opportunity is in this sector, and why I think students should be excited to learn about this space and engage in it, either directly on the investment side or with the portfolio companies, where you can also play a strong role as an operator, and you can learn how to actually manage a business. And that's another skill set that's quite helpful in this industry as you think about how to add value to companies. I think, Gabriela, you're on mute still.
Sorry. Yeah, that's really impactful and truly meaningful, and I believe it must be great, knowing that the work that you're doing is doing something good for the world, and that must be very fulfilling. So truly admirable. Jacob, would you like to add anything else, and maybe talk to about your like experience with private equity? How's that gone for you?
Yeah. So at first, it was being someone who provides support, right? Um, I'll say what actually it started as and what it still is today. I say one of the really important attributes, or one of the really important methods, is humility. So, in terms of what Rick described, we do know that it has this type of impact that it could be really we can really influence the type of decisions that these companies make, or of course encourage the management teams to make these types of decisions. But it requires humility. So when you first start out as an analyst, which was the case for me, it required me actually being humble, meaning within the own firm, understanding my role, which is to listen and learn, um, and be patient. Um, that actually, in terms of the literal work that I'd be doing, that was just doing diligence, researching industries, compiling information, and then putting together memos. And then every so often, it would mean actually joining these operating teams, meaning going on these trips, working with them, spending a few days with them, and understanding it. Um, and when at the time you're a kid, I mean, I was a kid, and it meant really making sure to be humble, understanding that I have to be patient and learn. And still today, that's the case. Even as someone who leads um, leads transactions, is still remaining humble. I say there's two attributes that have remained. It's humility and also passion. Of course, passion about these industries, um, passion about the type of the work and the results. But of course, still remaining humble. So it's something that's influenced my start, since graduating, and it still is fundamental to my life today.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the next question, which is, what are some things that you have learned or that have surprised you working in this industry?
Sure. So I think in terms of learning, the great thing about this industry is that you learn every day. We are in a situation where the companies that we're supporting are dynamic. They're changing, they're competing in the marketplace, they're making new offers, they're finding a way to deliver new value. So that learning curve is significant and it continues, over time as you're looking at new sectors. For us to get specific again, we're looking at parts of the internet that are going to evolve for the future. So we're talking about interactive video. We know that we're in a 4K video world, it's going to 8K video. We know that today, as you watch sports and entertainment, wouldn't it be great to have the perspective of the ball in a game in a stadium? Wouldn't it be cool to be any player you wanted to? We know that future is coming. It's really interactive and really high quality. And so how do you invest around that reality that's coming? How do you build an ecosystem around that? So that kind of learning is a lot of fun, and it's actually really motivating. It's part of what we do, and why I think we're excited to work hard and build value, on that basis here. So I think that's been a really fulfilling an exciting part of the journey, is to identify areas and trends for the future, as Jacob identified, and then find a way to organize yourself with teams, with your own work effort, and then eventually with your investments in support, of that outcome. I think the areas that have been surprising on the other side. Look, when I started in this industry, it was a very small industry, relatively speaking. There were, a very small number of roles, coming out of undergraduate, or graduate programs, frankly, for that matter, to enter the private equity industry. You had to go through a more traditional path of investment banking, and consulting and so on, and then kind of, work for several years, build some operational capability, and then get into private equity. I think the reality is, as the industry has matured and as there's now many other opportunities to engage with companies, with various partners that support the industry, the size of the industry has grown, and your ability, I think, to enter the industry in various ways, that are not just the traditional path of going down a finance path, but really finding an operational pathway, finding a way to work with companies, finding a way to be a subject matter expert in an area that you have a lot of, background and passion and domain, focus on, All those are other ways that you can now enter this business that were not there, when I began my career in this space. And I think ultimately what remains, both I think exciting and in a positive way surprising is just the opportunity ahead still remains profound, even though we're in a difficult part of the economic cycle, even though there's questions about recession and what's happening to the global economy. Private equity is a long-term business. We're not as impacted by the short-term blips in the market cycles. And so the beauty of this business is this ability to take a long-term view and to really, build your own skills and your own network and your ecosystem, your mentorship base of people that can help you and advise you. It's a long-term business, and that really should be your ultimate orientation. And I think the key to success in this industry.
Jacob, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. So I'll add two things which surprised me. One, it's something what I'm actually surprised by. I continue to be surprised by. Sometimes one comes across something which appears obvious, but no one's taking the same position. And then I'll just speak for myself. One starts to get worried, saying, well, no one else sees the same way. Maybe that means there's something wrong with the position that I've taken. And it's not being afraid to take that different position, especially when it's intuitive, especially when it's logical or it's instinctual. So in the case of mine, for some of the spaces I've looked at, for example, one of them is building these hot springs. No one's really done it in North America. They exist all around the world. People have been going to them for centuries across continents, regardless of their culture. Yet this type of tradition didn't really exist in North America. And the reason is because it didn't exist. They don't exist physically. Sometimes some of the folks when I initially began working on it and I discussed it with people, they tried to figure out different reasons. This is why no one's done it. But the reality is I know there'd be interest in it. It's just they physically don't exist in North America, these types of hot springs. And one has to not be afraid to take a position that other people haven't, and not to get nervous if you see these really sophisticated people who haven't taken the same position. Because now that I have, I know many of these groups are actually tracking my project. So one, it's not being afraid to take a position, a contrarian position. Because sometimes these contrarian positions are actually, they're really obvious and they're really instinctual, and to trust your instinct. And then the second thing is not becoming too analytical. So as I said before, it's instinctual. That as we make decisions, making sure that we let the art or the experience drive decisions and not just some financial model. So to use my Huntsman example again, when I looked at this space, of course the returns were really compelling, but as the team and I make decisions for our venues, it's about making sure that we continue to let the experience and let the art drive what we do, and not some financial model. And it's not something that's intuitive. Often in school, we try to say, oh, let's run a discounted cash flow or something. Let's see different ways of valuing the company. Let's let those models drive our decision making. When at a certain point, you have to let the art drive what you do, not just instinct, but let the experience. What's really the best decision, and often the financial results will justify it. So that was the other thing that surprised me.
Yeah, that's definitely surprising. And it's kind of like taking a look at the future and having a vision and actually creating it, which is extraordinary. So in both of your cases, you both had different, unique, original ideas and have actually tried to make them a reality. So from what I understand, you're both entrepreneurs. So if you could talk a little bit about how you went from just an idea to make it a reality, that would be incredible.
Yeah, and happy to give you my background and obviously give you a perspective on how to think through that entrepreneurial journey, Gabriela, because I think wherever you are, whether it's at a big firm or a small firm, you should think like an entrepreneur. You should think as someone who is independent. I think you need to understand and learn the frameworks and the toolkits and the foundation of any environment that you're in. But then to really harness that effectively, you have to have your own point of view, in terms of what space you're going after, in terms of what's going to be your edge and your ability to add value to various people that you're working with. And so I think it's really essential that you develop that sense of conviction over time. To your point, though, also with entrepreneurial success, it doesn't happen overnight, right? I think that the reality is, for me, I went through a career where I was a part of a large and established platform with Goldman Sachs. I saw how they did their business. I saw how they made investments. And then I continued on a journey where I then went into industry and I worked with technology firms making investments, and I saw how they were doing it and how they looked at, various opportunities to find what's next. And then I put some of those elements together ultimately, and I found an opportunity coming out of a company in Silicon Valley where I had spent time, I built credibility, I built the trust of leadership such that I had access then to their pipeline of deals. I had access to their capital. And most importantly, I had access to their team members that were able to help me do something different in the marketplace. And so that's how I named my firm Digital Alpha. But like everything else, the Alpha came for us for being first in terms of this industry model and our partnership. But Alpha also has the financial meaning of doing something different than the market beta, right? I think that's fundamental. In the private equity industry, you don't want to just be following the market. You want to make sure that you're doing something different and that you have a way to add value, beyond what the market is doing fundamentally. And so, we were fortunate as we scaled. The first funds that I raised were, a few $100 million of capital, which was still significant, to be able to go out there to prove the model, to prove what I had. And the second fund series that I raised, we were fortunate to even be oversubscribed and raise over $1 billion of capital for our next fund. So, as we sit here today, we're well north of $1.5 billion of assets under management with the funding structure that we've created only in the last few years. That's already delivering real results, real yield back to our limited partners who are the end investors in our firm. But like everything else, you didn't kind of start with that as the immediate goal. You get there, over time by working on a trajectory of proving what you can do, of showing that you can be a good partner for people that entrust you with their money and their business plans and their ideas. And then as you demonstrate, your success over time, the capital will come and the scaling will follow from there.
Wow, that's incredibly impressive. Jacob, would you like to share a bit about your entrepreneurial journey?
Yes. So I'll echo what Rick said. And something I'll add to it is that I didn't do it by the intent of saying I'm going to be an entrepreneur, so let me do XYZ things. Really, part of it is building a capital base, and in order to get the trust of these other limited partners, it wasn't because I had the goal, let me win their trust, let me prove something to them. It's the opposite. I mean, if you do really good work and you show that you're mature and trustworthy, these types of things will they follow. So it was it didn't come about intentionally. It's something that happened over time and it really was something that eventually one day I woke up, I realized I have a really strong network of people who want to invest in me. And it's no longer about the transactions I'm working on and proving to them this is a really compelling deal. It was, they just want to do something because I'm a part of it. So I'd say one has to be patient and perhaps not maybe work and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, so let me do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And under that line of reasoning, we'll move on to the last question, which is, what advice or recommendations do you have for students trying to find their path or looking to pursue a career in private equity?
Good. Well, I have a simple and easy answer, which is that we're hiring. So we're very happy to speak to students, because we're growing, we're doing well as a firm. And that's one reason why we're happy to sponsor, this event as well, with you guys, because I think it's important that students get exposed to new areas, new ideas, and see if there's a fit in terms of what they're passionate about, in terms of what they want to learn, and build some of that foundational skill set. And I think to the point of having an open mind, humility, but also frankly eagerness and drive to learn and to gain awareness. I think all those things have to fit together to come together to make you a compelling candidate. For us, and in terms of my partnership now and affiliation back with Penn, we're going to have a cycle process. We're going to hire interns. We're going to hire full-time analysts and associates. I'm staying very close to this network and this community that I cultivated early in my career, because I know it's a very high-quality pool of talent. I know that we can attract and coach and cultivate, the future leaders of tomorrow, which I want both inside our firm and organization, but also with the companies that we're investing in. Those companies are great businesses. And I think people should also think that, being in private equity doesn't just mean being an investor. It can also mean running a company and really building a lot of value for that business and that franchise as well. So I'd encourage students to think on both those vectors, which is you can be an investor, which is a great business, but it requires, again, a certain kind of cadence and a certain set of skills and a certain expectation. The other side you can go on is being an entrepreneur and really an operator, when it comes to running a business. And I think that also is something that could be attractive for students if you're going to do something on the earlier stage of private equity, which is more on the venture side and smaller businesses, or if you're going to join a larger firm but have responsibility for a division. I've seen students do this and take ownership of a project or a platform, an initiative, even early in their career, and get that responsibility. That's a very valuable skill to cultivate, and it can make you an effective investor, down the road. So I think both of those pathways are open, and we'd be very happy to speak to students as well as they're interested, to try to build the next generation of talent on our side as well.
Yeah, from what I understand, private equity is truly the best of both worlds, and it deals with many fronts, and that exposure is incredibly valuable. Jacob, do you have any recommendations for students to get into?
Yes, I would. The good news, I don't want to only speak about Penn students, because I know some folks are part of this from other universities, but my own case, some of the folks that I often hire partner with on my project are people who went to Penn. Including one of my former roommates. So that's something that's helpful. So people have already done that. In terms of something I would encourage students to do, practical while they're at school, I encourage them to really remain curious. And again, I guess I'm talking about intent, not saying I need to intentionally join something related to private equity. I think that you should really remain curious and demonstrate passion. And you can learn many of the skills that you'll need, not by studying some sort of guide of breaking into private equity or something, but by exploring something you're passionate in. For example, when I was at Penn, something that I would say really, I think it still helps me today, was some of my work for the Wharton International Business Review of examining these really fascinating issues that folks didn't know about, and understanding different parts of it, the financial angles of it, cultural angles of it, geopolitical issues. And when I discussed some of those articles with current students from Penn who've reached out to me, and also some students from Penn who discussed some of their work writing for it, I really am able to understand their passion, and I think that many of that type of work would actually apply to working in private equity. So I'd encourage students to really remain curious while they're at Penn, and open-minded, and explore things that they're genuinely interested in. And as long as you're able to do that, then that'll set up the best path for you to enter private equity. And if it's not private equity, something else that you're prepared to enter, your skills at that time are tailored to enter. So I just encourage students to remain curious and passionate. And of course, if people want to get in touch with me about some of their internships we're going to have next year, they can certainly do that.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but thank you so much. I can't express how grateful we are for your time, advice, for sharing your amazing experiences with us. It's truly inspiring. It was a privilege to moderate this panel about private equity. And now we're moving on to the next sequence of the Global Game Changer Summit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Very good.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.